Good evening and welcome. This is a public hearing of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the City of Evanston. The zoning ordinance directs this body to hear applications for major variations, special uses, and appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator. Depending on the type of matter, this board will either make a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Would you please call the roll?
Scott Gingold,
Present.
Matt Rogers,
Present.
Mary McCauley, Myrna Aravallo,
Here.
Mary Beth Burns,
Here.
Lisa Deacon, Violetta Cullen.
Here.
With 5 members present, we do have a quorum. Also present tonight is zoning planner Melissa Klotz. This is a formal meeting and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time, so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the board regarding any matter on the agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Our procedure is to hear from staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. Next, persons who wish to make a statement regarding the matter may do so at that time. Any person with a legal interest in property located within 500 feet of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the board will close the record and begin its deliberation. All testimony will be under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony or statement to your personal knowledge. When you address the board, please state your name and address. And sign in on the provided sheet. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you are at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We do only have one item on the agenda this evening. Is the applicant for 2767 Crawford Avenue present? Yes. Thank you. The first item that we do have on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes of April 5th. Has everyone had an opportunity to look through those, and is there any need for correction or edits?
The only correction is on page 3, 4th paragraph. There is a word Ballard. It's Bollard, B-O-L-L-A-R-D.
With that change, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of April 5th, 2016.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll note that any member who did not vote was not present at that meeting. With that, we will move into the one item we have on the agenda this evening. I would ask for 2767 Crawford Avenue to be read into the record, please.
Matthew Kustash, architect, applies for major zoning relief to construct a new single-family residence in the R2 Single-Family Residential District. The applicant requests to construct access to on-site parking, attached garage, across the front property line to Crawford Avenue, where access to on-site parking across a front property line is prohibited when alley access is present. Zoning Code Section 68311. The Zoning Board of Appeals makes a recommendation to City Council, the determining body for this case. Documents included as part of the record include variation application submitted March 10th, 2016, standards form, zoning analysis, plat of survey, site plan, elevations, image of property, aerial view of property, zoning map of property, Dapper meeting minutes of March 23rd, 2016, as well as one email of support that was passed out at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you. At this point, I would ask that anybody who may be speaking to us in this matter be sworn by raising their right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
I do.
Thank you. And if you would please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Matthew Kustish. My address is 934 Apple Tree Lane in Deerfield, Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Kustish. And if you would please tell us about your proposal.
Our proposal is for a new construction at the address 2767 Crawford. We were faced with an unexpected increased front yard setback, and I was unaware of the ordinance originally when we were designing this home that prevented us from actually accessing Crawford Avenue from the home, since the entire block has driveways that do feed Crawford Avenue, we had just assumed we would be able to do the same. Upon investigation and further zoning analysis and the formal zoning application, we were surprised by both the deeper front yard setback on that block and the inability to create new curb cuts on Crawford Avenue. I'm here to ask the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance. We have obviously adjusted the floor plan of the home to respect the 33-foot front yard setback, but we would like to ask for a variance allowing us for curb cuts at Crawford Avenue. I have prepared a brief summary of PowerPoint presentation. I could like to talk to you about a couple of the hardships that we're dealing with in this case. Thank you. The first is more of a physical hardship that relates to the alley with which we're supposed to be using. I wanted to point out something that as far as hardship is concerned, it's an alley that is not typically used. We have received an email from an existing resident that further states it's not plowed in the winter and never in good shape due to the traffic of only the garbage trucks that collect the trash from the rear of these lots. As you can see in this photograph, every single occupied residence on this block of Crawford Avenue has access to Crawford or the adjacent street, the perpendicular street. No one really uses the alley on this block. And that's again why we thought we would do the same. We considered putting the garage in back, but there are a couple physical elements that really don't make this feasible. They make it hard. The first being, obviously in the winter, the city doesn't maintain this alley, so you truly do need a 4x4 to get in and out of your driveway or out of your garage and use the alley during the heavy snowstorms in the winter months. In addition, it's constantly filled with pits. It's a gravel driveway or a gravel alley that oftentimes needs maintenance that the city does not provide. There's been numerous complaints by the residents along this alley who are supposed to be using this alley but don't. As you can see on the right, second physical hardship is the location of the utility pole and the existing tree that we had expected to maintain. Further prohibits an appropriate garage location in the back of our lot. It's not that the utility pole can't be moved, it just makes things harder. Obviously, in looking at the zoning itself, you can see the dark dash lines are the setbacks. The setback line that's closest to Crawford Avenue is what is considered a typical setback line in the zoning district. The second line behind that represents our 33-foot setback on this block in particular. And then obviously the square that it creates is our buildable area. I wanted to, for graphic purposes, show you what a 20-foot by 20-foot detached garage would look in the rear of this property. It is less than 10 feet to the residence, which without proper fire rating is illegal. It maintains the 3-foot and 3-foot setbacks on the alley, but it completely eliminates half of the yard for use by the family with which I was commissioned to do this project. It's a very, very difficult lot to build on in general, and with the addition of the length being reduced by the 6-foot additional front yard setback and the legal requirement to use the alley, it was just unanticipated. So those are, in essence, the two hardships that we're primarily trying to deal with, and hopefully the Zoning Board of Appeals will realize that they are hardships. I wanted to point out that nothing is impossible. Of course, you can build a lot or a house on this lot. It just makes things extremely difficult to do. And these are just a couple floor plans. We're not doing anything crazy here. It's a typical 4-bedroom house. We're actually doing a modified split level, trying to make use of the limited square footage we have in the buildable area with the attached garage, front elevation, proposed elevation. Obviously, if you have any questions, I'm sure, hopefully I can answer them.
In your plan, what's the distance between the front of the garage and the front of the building?
Let's see here.
If you were to take the garage off? Is that like 10 feet?
I don't have a scalable document at this point, so if I were to venture a guess, being 19-foot interior depth, it's approximately 7 to 8 feet. By looking at the graphic on the left, you could see the dashed line of the garage door is 8 feet in length because it represents an 8-foot tall door. So if that's 8 feet, it's actually more like 6.5 feet, I would estimate by looking at this graphic.
On the site plan that you provided to the city, where you've got dimensions on the plan, are those correct?
Those are correct.
Thank you.
Could do the math.
So it's 6.25 feet.
Yep. I was just about to do the math. Thank you.
Do you know if Melissa, do you know if the house that was just moved, since they haven't come before us, they must be planning on using the alley as well?
They do not have a garage at this time. I believe they have a parking pad that is off of the rear, I believe.
Right, okay.
And Melissa, the reason for the 33-yard front yard setback is because of the surrounding houses?
It is the average setback of the entire block.
And normally in this neighborhood, we would have 27?
Correct.
Okay. And when you were looking at coming before the board, did you consider what could be done in terms of moving the house forward on the property in order to make a garage work?
Yeah, but the biggest issue was actually the client's interest in maintaining green space in the rear of the yard. It's the private part of the house, and they wanted as much yard as they could possibly get. So one of the elements was removing the detached garage. An attached garage was extremely important to the client. Didn't want a garage filling up the rear yard.
But just to be clear, if you take the attached garage off, you are able to move the house 6¼ feet forward.
That is correct.
And so now you can have a regular sized garage in a fully compliant location,
By attached garage or detached garage?
detached.
You can put a detached garage on this lot, but it's hard. It's a hardship. It's not an impossibility. That's true. That is correct.
You're familiar with Evanston, that the bulk of the houses here in Evanston have detached garages,
Yes, I
right?
am.
Okay, thank you.
Are there additional questions for the applicant at this time? If not, I know some other person in the room, did you have anything that you wanted to say to us?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. So with that, Mr. Kustash, if you would like to say anything in summation before we close the record and begin our deliberation.
One of the things, I don't know if anybody has driven by the lot. Physically, it's an also very unique lot in that it has a substantial berm at Crawford Avenue. The garage itself is partially subterranean, and that is to reduce its overall physical impact on Crawford Avenue. Yes, I'm aware, Ms. Burns, that most detached garages, most homes in Evanston do have rear detached garages, but on this block, to fit into the fabric of the existing neighborhood, it's actually rare that the garages are detached and in the rear of the lot. Also wanted to mention that this part of Crawford Avenue does have parking on both sides of the street. One of the concerns I have always is your egress and ingress from a main public thoroughfare onto a private property. Crawford can be a busy street, but this part of Crawford is actually, it's pretty light traffic, and there is parking on both sides, which actually allows for more of a buffer between the public and private zones. So I guess that would be it.
Thank you. With that, we will close the record and begin our deliberation. Mary Beth had some thoughts that she brought up. Are there any other thoughts from the board that anybody wants to share before we go through standards?
My overall thinking is that while I agree with Mary Beth, or the suggestion in her questioning that there is a possible way to do this without the need for a variation, and while I strongly disagree with the applicant that the city not maintaining the alleys in Evanston constitutes a unique hardship to anybody in the city, I do think that there's a hardship here caused in part by the large average front yard setback required here, and on balance feel, as the aerial photo in the packet shows, that the character of the neighborhood is that they have front yard driveways and attached garages rather than detached garages on the alley. And so to me, the project makes sense from a neighborhood consistency standpoint, notwithstanding the fact that there is a way to do it without the need for zoning relief.
I agree with the applicant and Scott that this plan is consistent with what's happening with the rest of the houses with the front driveways or the parking pad.
I would just say that whereas it is consistent with what's going on in the neighborhood, there's almost a part of me that says if every house has a curb cut, that creates more problems for a neighborhood. I would like to also just reiterate what Scott had mentioned, that City of Evanston is not responsible for maintaining its alleys. And so that automatically is a non-starter for me in terms of a hardship. There are programs in which the city will pave alleys, but obviously if no one uses the alley except for one applicant or one person that makes it more difficult to get the alley paved because everyone has to chip in for it. But with that, we do have a set of standards that we must go through and find are met in order for us to make a recommendation to City Council. Again, with this particular case, we are recommending to City Council and not a determining body. The first one of those is the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. Obviously, anytime an empty lot is converted into a home, there is some impact on the neighborhood. We're hoping that by creating a new home, that will boost property values for the neighboring properties. And although, as I mentioned, there will be some impact because of obviously increased traffic, things like that, I don't think that it will be a substantial adverse impact. So I believe standard number 1 is met. Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance does try to keep cars off of the streets, even though there is parking on Crawford. It is a busy street along the entire route. I mean, some parts of it are busier than others, obviously, but it is an attempt to try to get parking off the street. So the fact that they are looking at that is in keeping with the zoning ordinance. I have a little bit of an issue with the fact that an applicant has, and I guess I'll get to this a little bit later, but an applicant has purchased a lot that is only 114 feet deep and then complains that there is no backyard. It seems to me that purchasing that type of a lot, one would be aware that they would run into problems in terms of not having a lot of living space in the backyard. But as far as this particular standard, I believe that it is met. Number 3, the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. This is a unique property in the fact that it is a very shallow property. So I am willing to say that the standard is met based on the 114-foot depth of the property, and that it does create an issue, along with the fact that there is a greater than average front yard setback as well. But even with those things, I believe that this particular property is unique, and the standard is met for having a hardship.
I disagree with that. I think that this property is no different than the multitude of properties that are shallower throughout Evanston. I also think that a 16-foot gravel alley is not unique to this property, and that is not a hardship as well.
I would agree with you on the alley.
I agree on the alley too, but to me, what makes the depth of the property unique and unlike the depth of most of the shallow properties in Evanston is that the average front yard setback for this particular block is above average for the city, and therefore, which is as an absolute measure when taken against a shallow lot, it creates a hardship that's unique to the property, or at least to the block, that's different from most of Evanston.
I would agree with that, but also in the way that this particular property has been designed, we're even setting the house back further because of the fact that the garage is set forward. But I'm not going to argue that particular point. Number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property. Whether parking is in the front or the back, we would expect a property like this to have some level of parking. Obviously, it is a property that's being built, but there is nothing in it that I believe is being done in the attempt to get extra income from the property or with this particular proposal. So I believe that this standard is met. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. This is one where, again, having mentioned that when someone purchases a 114-foot property, to then kind of claim that you don't have much space in the back to put a garage in, With this particular one, I feel that this standard has not been met, but I do believe that there are those who will feel that it has been met.
I would just like to add that, given that it's new construction, the applicant has the ability to design the house in such a way that if the primary goal is to have more backyard, then they have the ability to design the house that way. So they, by the design of the house, by the size of the house, by all of those metrics, they're choosing what is most important to them. And by choosing what's most important to them, they have created this hardship of not being able to put believing they can't put the garage in the backyard.
So I'll just disagree. If the hardship that's being identified, well, putting aside the alley as the hardship, because I don't agree with that, but if the hardship that's been identified is the shallowness of the lot combined with the oversized setback requirement, that difficulty or hardship was not created by this owner.
But they are looking to create something on this which is creating.
But you
That
could
is
say
a problem
that
for
at
them.
any time anybody comes seeking a variation,
you
that they have designed a project that requires a variation. That's not, in my view, that's not what this requirement is analyzing.
Okay.
I think what you're saying speaks to the next requirement, but that's another question.
Well, we're going to get to that one now. The requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before the Zoning Board of Appeals. This one, as has been mentioned by at least one of my colleagues, and even by the applicant, I believe, is that a feasible location does exist on the property. It does impact some of the wants and desires of the property owner. But again, there are trade-offs that have to be made when you purchase a property for development that is a small lot. And so I believe that standard number 7 has not been met as well.
So my thought on this one is yes, there was a no change necessary alternative provided. However, I believe that the design and the requested variation are, one, entirely consistent with the character of the rest of the block. Two, are therefore a quote-unquote minimal variation, not the absolute minimum, which would be none, but a minimal variation being requested. And three, I think that a technical reading of the requirement, when the choice that is giving you pause in the design, or the choice that is giving some of us pause in the design, is one that is being made to preserve green space, which I think is, yes, it's a choice, and there are lots of reasons why we all would like to have our own green space, but it's still preserving green space in the city, is one that is worth that kind of trade-off, especially when the design is, again, minimal and consistent with the character of the neighborhood. So I believe the standard is met in spirit, if not in letter.
I would just one comment, and then we can be done with this, which is that whether the garage is in the front or the garage is in the back, it takes up the same amount of space. So whether you're taking that green space and preserving it in the front, or taking that green space and preserving it in the back, it makes no difference.
That would be true if it wasn't standing alone, but the garage is recessed into the design of the house, so.
It's still square footage. That is still square footage. So.
Inside the garage is the same square footage, but the amount of space that it takes up on the property is not the same. It's incorporated into the design of the house.
I think if you were to remove that space and put it somewhere else, you're assuming that the owner would then fill that space with something else that's house-related. Other than that, I think it is a pretty even trade, one for one.
yeah, there's just no need to belabor that
Right,
point, though.
right.
So we can move on.
So with that, we have gone through the standards. There has been some level of disagreement as to whether or not the standards are met. I have gone through standards. I know some people have agreed with me. Some people have voiced opposition to those, and I think you've gotten everybody's votes on that. So I won't ask if everyone agrees with my finding of standards because I know not everyone does. So with that, I will ask if there is a motion for a recommendation of 2767 Crawford Avenue to City Council.
Yes. Although I sense this won't be resolved tonight.
Well, actually, it's a recommendation, so it will be resolved tonight. It will
Oh,
go.
super. Well then, I move in the matter 2767 Crawford Avenue, ZBA, matter number 16 ZMJV-0016, that we recommend that City Council grant the zoning relief requested on the condition that the property be developed consistent with the testimony and evidence submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of recommending approval of 2767 Crawford Avenue, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. With a vote of 3 in favor and 2 opposed, it will go to City Council with a favorable recommendation, and staff can work with you on exactly when you'll appear on P&D and City Council's dockets. That does conclude our business for this evening. Are there any other matters to be brought before the board?
Just to remind everyone that they should have gotten their economic interest statement from the county, and if you haven't gotten it from the city, you will be very shortly. Please make sure you do fill those out. I don't want to have to hound you, and I don't want you to get the $15 fine from the county.
That was by email, right?
The county one is by email. The city one, I think, is by regular mail.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Make sure you don't have any conflict.
Anything else? If not,
I move we adjourn.
Second.
been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned until our meeting on May 3rd.